Welcome to the App Growth Summit 2.0 webinar. Today, we're going to share some key insights for the new mobile marketing frontier. I'm joined by a team of mobile industry veterans, and we'll be discussing the latest in user acquisition, growth and retention, privacy, AI, and other industry trends. I know that you have many choices of where you want to spend your time this morning, whether it's watching the Euros match happening right now or company meetings. So definitely appreciate all of you joining us here. So today I'm joined by Alex Kozachenko. He is the CEO of Hyperbeard Games. Hyperbeard is the largest mobile game developer and publisher in Mexico, specializing in super cute, casual, cozy games before it became a thing for young women. So bootstrapped since 2017, Hyperbeard has over 250 million downloads, most of them organic, with titles including Adorable Home, Pocket Love, and Suki's Odyssey. Alex specializes in business, product, and marketing strategy. I'm also joined by Simon Vishnev. I'm sorry, Simon, I mispronounced your last name.
You just say Simon V.
Nevsky. He's the CGO at Credit Genie, which is a data-driven growth marketing He is a data-driven growth marketing leader with over 10 years of experience in acquisition across multiple consumer verticals. Right now, he's the CGO at Credit Genie, and it's a financial app that helps improve people's financial health with breakthrough financial tools and debt relief services. He previously led acquisition at the fintech app Dave, taking the company from around B to IPO. And before that, he was at Lyft and Zynga.
Hello.
And then I'm also joined by Hagop Hagopian. He is the founder and CEO of Advertiser. Hagop is also a veteran in mobile app marketing with over a decade of experience, including his time at Zynga, which is when I met him. In 2020, he founded Advertiser, which is a full-service agency covering everything from UA to ASO to analytics and soft launches. Advertiser supports a wide range of industries, including gaming, fintech, and music. I'm also joined by Ken Vermeil, who is the CEO at Vermilion Sky. He is the CEO, and Vermilion Sky is a product development studio creating MVP and continuous product development for apps. And then, of course, my name is Nancy Roberts. I am the president at Craftsman Plus. We are a full-service creative company doing everything from UGC, digital out-of-home, CTV, performance creatives. It's in our DNA, where we all come from mobile for over a decade. All right, so let's jump into our topics today. Thanks, Louie. So we're about to head into H2, and it's kind of crazy to me to think that we're at the end of June already. I feel that we were just starting May 2 days ago, and now 4th of July is next week for those of us in the US. H1 has been pretty busy. There's been a lot of ups and downs, turns and weaves, and some bobbles, but lots of peaks as well, even some pivots. So I want to ask, Ken, have you seen anything stand out as unexpected in product development?
Oh, absolutely. First, thank you for having me here. So when it comes to product development, what I've seen, so in the beginning of the year, we all had good expectations and it was a little rough and it wasn't exactly what we wanted it to be. Then AI kind of boomed and everybody kind of jumped on the AI train because it seemed like it was the last hope. And so what we've seen is just a clamoring of everybody trying to implement some type of AI system into their application. And what I've seen is some of the implementations are good. For example, I like the Canva implementation. It makes sense because when it comes to creating something, you start off with a blank canvas, and with Canva, they allow you to kind of like fill in things and move forward. But then we see some bad implementations from major companies. Like recently, Toys R Us released an AI generated ad, and it looked not great. It looked a little bit soulless. So what I'm seeing is everybody's trying to figure out what AI means to them and their product and how they can put it in a nice way. So some people are kind of rushing in and doing whatever, like just putting in AI just to say that they put in AI. And some people are, well, some companies are implementing it in a way that makes sense for their consumer, and being really intentional about the implementation. AI is a great tool, but when it comes to taking a step back and really trying to understand what your customer needs, the people who use it from that perspective, not as a silver bullet, but as the perspective of, I'm going to continue improving on my customer's experience, those people are going to be winners. And those are kind of the peaks that I've been seeing in that realm.
I feel like it's really blurry, right? Like anyone can claim to have some kind of AI implementation, and there's really no way to back it up other than believing a company has some kind of AI stack or optimization or utilizing Gen AI. There's no standardization of its implementation right now. Would you say that's true?
Oh yeah, not at all. One of the things that I'm pretty excited about is Apple's implementation, because again, there was a peak of everybody's joining in, implementing AI, and if you're not doing it, you're going to be left out. And then in April and May, everybody realized that, okay, if we don't implement AI, it's not the end of the world. So then Apple came out with their keynote and they said, well, we have our on product AI ML models, and we're also integrated with OpenAI. And that kind of sealed the deal when it came to whether or not you are or you aren't going to implement AI. Now it seems like maybe this is Web 4.0, and if you're not going to be part of that, you're going to be left behind, because Apple kind of said, hey, we're really going to do this. So implementation, yes, it's very blurry. Even the implementation of the AI systems within the new iOS 18, it's not like there's one AI thing that you do. It's just sprinkled across it's sprinkled across all of the apps. It's sprinkled across all of your experience. And I think that might be the best approach as people start really adapting to using AI in their day-to-day lives.
What do you think this means for Elon Musk's companies? Like, do you think that iPhones are really going to be banned at Tesla and formerly known as Twitter?
I saw that tweet, and he said, we're going to get a Faraday cage. And I understand his sentiment, but I don't think that he's really going to do that. I think his concern was privacy, right? His concern is, hey, now these AI devices are going to be in Tesla, potentially like listening to what we're doing, and it's like his hedge of protection to protect his like IP. But when I read into the documentation, like the actual development documentation, they're not always listening to everything that you're doing. OpenAI is an opt-in situation, so if you do say, hey, I want to use this OpenAI feature, it asks you every time. So it's not like it's just pulling in your data and doing all of that. So yeah, it's a weird tweet. I get where he's coming from, but I don't think what might make more sense is if you're having like a confidential meeting, yeah, maybe have everybody put their phone in a box and have the meeting without your phones. But outside of that, I don't think it's something that's going to be super scary or something that's going to take everybody's jobs or anything like that. In fact, I think it's going to help people be more efficient, and the people who don't use it are going to be, there's going to be a separation. When there were word processors, there were also people who used typewriters. And so you could still do your job, but now everybody uses word processors, and barely anybody except, rustic authors use typewriters.
Or the library.
Oh yeah, that too.
Alex, what have you learned in H1 with Hyperbeard?
Sure. So obviously it's from a gaming perspective and specifically a mobile gaming perspective. But I think in general, and this isn't necessarily just H1, but just kind of over the last year and a half, 2 years, the mobile market's becoming more crowded and it's becoming harder to be successful. I think the platforms and how they operate, obviously the big ones, Apple and Google, dictate a lot of who is and isn't successful. And right now, what that means is AAAs are getting a lot of visibility, even though there's just a report, I think, just came out about the success of AAA games on Apple in terms of monetary return is really, really poor. But they showcase the technology really well, so Apple's willing to pay for it, right? You see the same thing across like Apple Arcade, even Netflix, right? Netflix supposedly paid $50 million to get the GTA games. And if you look at the total number of downloads, it's just nowhere worth it, right? But they weren't really making a splash with other things, so they're just basically relying on IP. So if you have an existing IP that has a lot of value, or you have a AAA game that has a lot of value, like you're going to be able to extend that revenue curve on mobile. And of course, that blocks out most of the indie and kind of medium-sized businesses. The other companies that are still, the games that are still seeing a lot of success are the legacy games, right? Games that have been around for 10 plus years. Staple games as well, blackjack, your bingos, those games are still performing extremely well. But it is becoming harder to kind of create something new, especially with a small team. It's just really hard to compete when, the dev budget for one company is 10 million plus and your dev budget is below $1 million. So we've had to start to rely a lot more on paid marketing to get visibility, even though we are still largely organically driven. And that's kind of something we've been building over several years, kind of building our own strategy around it to make it work for us, because we have relatively low LTV games. But yeah, I think just increased competition has kind of been the thing here. And unfortunately, a lot of consolidation has also made it more difficult. Right, you have fewer partners, fewer ways to negotiate, fewer options. In the end, it's a game of size, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Size, gravity. You basically pull in other stuff, and if you're not big enough, you either get pulled in or you get left behind. So unfortunately, it's a little bleak.
Yeah, I want to pick your brain a little bit more about growth in a little bit, but I wanted to ask Simon a question about Credit Genie. I was reading yesterday that the average salary to buy a home in the U.S. now is over $100,000, where it used to be $59,000 only 4 years ago, and actually 4 years ago in 2020. That's a huge increase of what it requires just to buy a home, a median home in the U.S. So I imagine that puts financial health really at the forefront of priorities. Did you see any of the changes within Credit Genie in H1 because of this?
Yeah, I think in general, one of the things that's probably the hardest for people, even in our industry, is, if you're talking to people that work in gaming, right? Like whether you are a CEO of a gaming company or like a gamer that's just starting, you have the common set of, you can relate. There's a certain relatability. Everyone can play the game. Everyone understands how the economy of the game works. When you're in the fintech and you work in the financial industry, you just don't really know too many people that need $100 cash advance, right? This is not your network of people. It's really hard to relate, and it's really hard to understand where those people are coming from, what their demographics is, and how that shakes out across the US. I think one of the things that is one of the probably more astonishing facts for me is that the total addressable market for fintech apps was supposed to start shrinking this year, right? Like Chime, you guys heard about Chime, Dave, few others, right? The Firm, all those companies been around for a while. They've been acquiring users at scale. So you would think, and I've been asked that question by some of the VCs in the past too, when is the market going to start shrinking? Well, it actually is not, because people that are using the services, they're tapping into multiple services. This is a very sad reflection on general health of American public. When you have when you have people using 5 or 6 different apps to spot them, like $100 to $200 a month, right? So I think, to answer your question, I think it goes even below home ownership. It goes to the regular day-to-day survival, and there's a very, very sizable portion of U.S. population that needs to tap into those services. And really, when you go all the way down, you will find that those are people that also need help with the mortgages, then they help refinancing some of their student debt. So it's, once the lower down the socioeconomic funnel you go, the more services people will probably need, and they use multiple ads to get by. So it's part of a Credit Genie. We've seen that too. We're a latecomers to the to the microfinance / like building financial health game, right? We started out maybe a year ago compared to a company like Dave that's been around 5-6 years, and yet we're still finding a massive demand for our services. And people are coming from different apps, financial apps, and just really looking to double down and triple down on getting what they need out of a financial service.
So it doesn't change, though, that financial health is definitely a priority for like a huge swath of people, whether you're a homeowner or you're a renter. Like it's just incredibly difficult these days, especially with the cost of groceries increasing something like 60%, and the percentage of income needed in order to be a homeowner. So has that resulted in quite a bit of growth for you?
Yeah, I think to your point, there's just so many different aspects where people need financial health. For us, it's a little bit of a micro loan, helping someone spot some money till their next paycheck. And then some of that's also debt relief and debt consolidation at a higher level. We get those leads through the people that are coming in specifically for micro loan, but we've seen explosive growth. And again, when you look at that snapshot of like quarter over quarter, what drives that, right? You have things like gas prices. Gas prices go up, and all of a sudden you have a different subset of people coming in, the commuters, the people that really need to drive obviously a lot, right? And then next month you'll see rents in US go up by X percentage, right? Or maybe certain geos. And then you have a different type of subset of users coming in. Now you have your interest rates going up, right? So some of these people are taking on mortgages at a higher interest rate, and then they actually need to spot money. Someone, one person loses a job in a household of 2 or 3, and then you're in a different position here. So yeah, all those different factors are very beneficial in the way to a financial, financial vertical and fintechs in general. But I think you can definitely see how hopefully it moves into more educational aspect eventually down the line, and just help pull people out of that, out of the financial situation they're in, as opposed to just kind of giving them that straw. And I think right now fintech's a little bit more of a straw, which is giving you a one-time solution. But eventually, where I think a lot of people want to get to is giving people a more permanent solution, whether it's starting investing, 401k, like putting money aside and figuring out better financial habits, so to speak. So right now, again, it seems like we're just helping people in the moment, but it's not really a long-term solution yet.
And by gas prices increasing, you mean everywhere but Texas, right?
That's right. That's right.
I love getting gas in Texas. So that's a perfect segue into let's talk about growth. There's been a huge shift in how UA and growth channels are performing. Do you go with Google and Meta? Do you go with DSPs? What is the level of effort for each one? Signal is becoming lower and lower fidelity, even though we're increasing a lot of our media and there's more data points to gather. But with all the changes in scan and different methods of user acquisition, like we're operating in a low signal environment. So Alex, what does this mean for you when you were talking about your organic growth and then expanding out into more paid channels? What are some of the channels that you've adopted? Is it the typical Google and Meta, or are you testing with DSPs as well?
We're testing pretty much everything. It's a bit of, because it's difficult to make the UA equation work, we don't only want to add so much overhead, which reduces the ability to test a ton of channels. And also, there's a general principle that if you can't get the main channels like Google and Meta to work, then you shouldn't go to the next thing. But we are testing, Google, Facebook, the SDK networks. We're on Unity level play, so Iron Source, Unity, Offerwall type stuff, and even DSPs. But there are some networks that are probably more creative hungry that we typically stay away from, like TikTok, which actually probably provide a pretty good opportunity for games like ours. But again, it requires quite a bit of overhead potentially. So kind of what we have needed to do is, your typical UA equation is obviously CPI minus LTV, right? If that number is, or I guess LTV minus CPI, right? If that number is positive, it's good, go buy more. If it's not, then, you need to adjust your bids. What we've had to do is basically pull in more value into that LTV equation. So for us, having a portfolio, we've had to pull in value from games that users will go to after they get acquired. We've even had to potentially think about the organic uplift factor, which is something that has been basically impossible to measure for the entire existence of time. But for us, it's especially difficult because we do have so many organic downloads. So we're really kind of trying to pull value wherever we can and saying, all right, is this viable? Like, can we get some scale with this, right? Because it is very difficult. Ultimately, you are competing against other games that have significantly higher LTVs, that have better economies of scale, that, they can buy a few users here and there, so a few users for them, but they're getting these massive features from the platforms because they have been successful. And typically with Apple, Google, and basically, I guess really any industry, success breeds success. So it's really hard to kind of knock off incumbents or even compete with them. So we really had to pull in a lot more value. At the same time, we've really kind of had to think, all right, where is organic trending? If Apple and Google are not being as kind to indies as they have been in the past, where can we find the opportunities? It is still very possible to go viral on TikTok. We just actually had this happen with one of our games, a game we launched a couple of years ago called Suki's Odyssey. Went viral in Latin America. It was actually the #1 game, even got ranked above Supercell's new game, Squad Busters, during its release week, which is pretty awesome. But that is kind of a rare occurrence and usually happens largely organically. It's hard to replicate, although we did some things internally that did kind of push it to that swell. But yeah, we're just looking for any opportunities that we can to kind of find a way to compete with these bigger companies.
What would you say is the split between your organic and actual paid media?
Sure, it's probably about 80% organic right now, which is
that's amazing.
Yeah, down or up, whichever we're going to look at it. I mean, we were 97% in 2022. It wasn't even close. So and really the paid stuff we all did with back then was just testing. And it's still over $1 million in the year. But we really you kind of have to rely on organics. And I think what you don't realize is a lot of these bigger companies with the larger LTVs, like they are getting these organics too, right? There are games out there certainly that are just buying their way to success, but like, the Clash of Clans, let's use Supercell as an example every time. But like they're getting tons and tons of organics. Subway Surfer is getting tons and tons of organics, right? Yeah, they're doing some paid, but like it's mostly organic. And a lot of that is the brand element. They've created a strong brand, both in terms of quality and just, what the stores like to see. Fortunately, we have the same thing going for us, so we also get some of that advantage, but at a smaller scale. So it's not like we don't get support from Apple and Google. It's just not quite the same level. Yeah, it's just figuring out a way to compete is the challenge.
So I want to touch on some of what you brought up about TikTok a little later, but I want to ask Hagop, because you have an agency that specializes in buying media for your clients. What is the shift in UA channels and performance meant for you?
Yeah, I think I'll try to cover a little bit on like the back end before jumping into the channel perspective. I mean, obviously, for the first half of the year, as Alex mentioned in the beginning, is that competition is just keep rising. It's just becoming a lot more difficult for companies to acquire users. Therefore, we're seeing a lot of difficulties on the CPI end. Like companies are not being able to get the ROI that they're looking at. And mostly, besides the competition, it's also the attribution part created a lot of difficulties and challenges for media buyers. And when I'm talking about here, I'm covering more for the early day startups, the mid to small size companies, or maybe Series A companies. Whereas maybe the AAA, it's a different world. So with that being the case, I think attribution has got to a point where we're seeing companies are relying less on last touch, obviously. At the same time, SCAD is just becoming unreliable. Like it's missing a lot of data points. So therefore, that's causing you issues on which channels to buy from, right? Therefore, the way that companies are looking into this, and we're looking into this, is that, well, first we got to cover the signal before we can say where we should buy, right? So with that being the case, so we started to look into alternative attribution models that is not just relying on SCAD network or last touch. And one of them, I think right now, it's probably the one that has the best results for you, is basically probabilistic attribution and relying on IP addresses. So with that, recovering the signal, then you have a little bit better look of like how your campaigns are performing, essentially. So what does that mean on the channel side, like with you recovering these data? So I think obviously the bigger channels, like such as the Facebook and Meta, they're still the front runners when it comes to UA, and mostly because I would say they have their own attribution. Second, there's the direct connection where you can feed their algorithm with data, so you're not just relying on an intermediator like an MMP to feed them with data. So using Firebase SDK, Facebook Ads SDK. So that's the way we're seeing that's making Facebook and Google work with SCAD. Otherwise, if you just completely rely on SCAD for attribution and postbacks, it's not going to work. The reason is because they said 4.0 is out there, but the adoption rate is not there.
Yeah, what is the adoption rate these days? Yesterday, I was reading it's like not even at 40% yet.
Yeah, there you go. So that's on the publisher side, right, Nancy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the channels are not ready. If I'm not mistaken,
right,
only few channels have SCAD 4.0 attribution, and now Apple is talking about SCAD 5.0. You know, so it's like, I
mean, they've been talking about it, but I don't think SCAD 5 is coming anytime soon. There's just going to be different changes in between now and then.
Absolutely. So going back to the topic, like, well, in H2, well, what do you do? Like, where do you look into and investing? I think the main dogs like TikTok and Facebook and Google are still the front runners. TikTok is obviously is a major one, but I would say it depends on the product. It doesn't work for everybody, and it's also requires a lot of creatives. If you have 5 creatives on Facebook, let's say, you need 15 creatives on TikTok, and it has to be all of them UGC, organic feeling content, you know. So therefore, it's a lot more labor intensive. Yeah, it might be lower CPI you might get, but definitely not there. However, the other thing on TikTok side is, well, now there's a little bit of a fear with TikTok. Is it going to be completely banned in the US or not? I think it's also dependent on the economical situation of the country. So what does that mean for others? I think we have seen, and the data is proven, is that a lot of the companies, the paid social companies that stayed away from app install campaigns and they focus more on e-commerce, now they're coming back to the app install. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the Q1 channel index, it indexed high for channels like Snap, Pinterest. Reddit is another one that's coming up. They're all in on like going in terms of the app install campaigns. So I do expect to see a little bit of a change in the market where we might see us going back into buying from these channels to create a little bit of a
Mhm.
diversification.
So you said something interesting a little bit ago. Do you feel that scan is a social truth, or should we go back to incrementality testing and using probabilistic to get the data and the measurements that we need to measure a successful campaign?
In my view, I think you cannot just rely on one single source of truth. I think you have to have multiple sources. You have we're proving this across clients using your own internal data. Don't put it in the hands of like the external partners only. I'm not against like MMPs or any. In fact, we're official partners of all of them, for a majority of them at least. But I think you do want to have multiple sources, and with that you can analyze and say, well, am I seeing the right signal across the board? If they're all telling the right story, they're all telling the same story, then you're in good hands. So at the end of the day, I would not say just focus on one. I think have multiple. And I mean, I think to answer your question is just, I think we can talk about this forever because I don't think there's a one simple answer to this, to be honest.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. So my take on this, don't completely rely on scat. That I would say, at least.
I would add and hire more growth analysts because you're analyzing multiple sets of data across the MMPs, across the publishers, across the DSPs that you're working with. Like there's so many data sets that you need to make sense of. It feels like the growth marketer / analyst role needs to come back in a big way.
I agree, but we're taking a different approach. We're riding the wave of the future. So instead of hiring more analysts, we're actually
You're adopting AI.
we're replacing analysts with AI. Yep. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that in later stages as well.
All right. So you mentioned UGC a little bit ago, and I know, Alex, you've been utilizing UGC in TikTok, and Simon, you're using TikTok as well as one of your channels. Does UGC work? Like personally, I feel that UGC works. I've seen a lot of campaigns. We've created a lot of UGC for specific clients so that they can buy media against the UGC. And by UGC, I don't necessarily mean like the organic content that an influencer records and then you can promote it. And by UGC, I mean like having UGC style creatives that you're buying on TikTok and Meta in order to fulfill your growth strategies and goals for UA. Alex, how has TikTok helped you with the organic virality of your games?
So I would actually, on the paid side, I would say it hasn't really yet. It's not something we've cracked. It's more on the organic side. So I think when, and I think there are obviously parallels to paid. When someone really likes your game and they're willing to create an ad effectively, or just content that promotes your game, and they have a dedicated following, right? Those are the three great things that you have right there, and then you can amplify it, which is awesome. So what happened for us with Suki's Odyssey most recently, and it's happened before with other games as well, is an influencer picked up the game. They shared something they liked with their audience. We noticed a spike. We reached out to a couple more influencers, and basically just created this wave, which was able to basically ride the game all the way to #1 in LATAM. We had this happen in June of 2021 with Adorable Home. We ran a Pride event. Game was #1 in most Western geos, #1 in the USA. It's TikTok as well, right? But it started organically, and started with kind of these micro influencers effectively. So not huge names, but names that have a big enough passion, enough following. So we're still working out a way that we can kind of build that into a program, and also kind of leverage paid channels or paid amplification to get that to spread further. But I think it is difficult because at least we haven't found the success yet on the paid side, because we did the TikTok creator content thing, I think a couple years ago.
TCCC.
Yeah, something like that. And the quality of what they gave us was just just garbage. You know, and it
Well,
was,
I know a couple of people on this webinar who can help you out with that.
yeah. So it was not the best, and I hope it's improved. But you know, I mean, I don't know how they source the people, obviously, but you know, if people are just like, hey, well, I can make a few quick bucks by just pretending I like this game, it doesn't come across as authentic. And I think that's the challenge, is finding something that truly is sounds authentic and is catchy as well. That is obviously good content that people want to consume. Because right, that's what TikTok is. It's like it is the number one consumption channel right now, I think, for video, or short form video at least. And so, you know, you need people to watch it and then people to like it.
Well, and because it's video, it's sticky, right? Because you get the view through attribution. So it does perform well because of that view through attribution. Whereas, you know, if you're using it on other channels, if you don't have that view through on a video, then the conversion might not look as high.
Yeah, generally, yes. Obviously, it is better, but it has to not really come across as an ad. I think that's the key.
Right, authenticity matters, especially with the generations that we're marketing to right now.
Yeah, and we've seen, like, when our games do go viral, I mean, the day one retention rates will go from 40 to 60%. Our day 30s will go to like 25% from like 10%. It's just crazy because people want to do things that other people recommended to them that they actually care about, or that their friends told them about, right? That's one of the big things is, you know, I'm going to play this game now, and I'm not only going to play this game, but I'm going to play it more often. I'm also going to spend more in it because I know my friend is playing it right now. I'm part of basically a viral trend.
And that kind of applies to you too, right, Simon? Like with UGC or even TikTok, seeing authentic videos from creators talking about financial health piques others' interest.
Yeah, I think that's a really big shift this year too, is that where in the past, let's say you partner up with a creative agency, they'll give you a batch of creatives and you just resize and disperse it across a lot of different channels. Somewhere even last year, I think, you know, especially with the TikTok Creative Studio coming into prominence and being a very successful experiment for them. And for those who don't know, is basically TikTok gets you a bunch of different creatives from their creative studio where they partner up with different influencers. And so that spurred every other channel and even the agencies to work closer with platforms. And so really figuring out the format that worked for Facebook or say Meta. For Meta, something that works for YouTube and then for TikTok, and then even DSPs are now getting into creating, kind of making their own creatives and working with agencies on getting the content that's more custom tailored. You know, you take your fintech influencers that can specifically talk to that topic, not just any influencer. You spin up something on TikTok that really, really caters to the audience. They have experience. They might have worked for a few fintechs before. And then you have great results because the content matches the delivery, matches the concept. Obviously, you're overseeing the guidelines and creator guidelines, and you're giving them something to work with. I think there's a question here from Mackenzie around AI generating ads for gaming. I'll spin it for like for fintech, for example. It's really hard. It's really hard to iterate on some of those formats and some of their content. So we're talking about differentiating yourself with a very customized approach. I want this on TikTok. I want this to be done by a creator. I want this to be done on Meta in this specific format that appeals to like the Instagram users. So I think AI generated ads still have a little bit to go. Copy for sure. You can work on copy. You can just plug in and chat GPT and plug away on figuring this out. But the actual delivery and the concepts, iterating on that from the AI perspective, still remains a challenge. So we want authenticity, and we want authenticity that's matched to a specific platform. That's one of the biggest trends that I've seen this year on creative, and really like last year as well.
And the underlying message being testing, right? Like test your creatives, A/B test them, test your hero images, test video versus static versus interactive end cards. Are you using interactive end cards in your channels? Not TikTok, of course, but your other channels, and making sure that the messaging is clear and it's authentic and that it's it's going to work. So having various iterations of your creatives makes a lot of sense. And you brought up something really interesting a little earlier, where you said, you know, a lot of the channel partners are now providing the creatives as part of their service, where it used to be so segregated. It was, you know, this is where you go for traffic and this is where you go for creatives. And now it's kind of all intermingled. And what kind of value add do you provide to set yourself apart being a channel partner?
Yeah, I think that's really a huge shift in perspective, and really understand. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. If you're one of the DSPs and you want to increase the conversion rates on your platform, and you're not just the source of traffic, not where people are buying, but also where people are gonna, where you want to increase the efficiency of your channel, you have the keys to everything. You understand what works on your platform. You understand what kind of testing needs to be done, what creative, what optimization events should be there to optimize the efficiency. In the past, it was all left to your partners to figure out on your own.
Right.
Now there's a lot more hand holding, and that's the hand holding that people actually need. If you're brand new to the UA world, to user acquisition, you come into one of those platforms, a lot of times you don't really know where to start. You know, it takes years of experience to understand the general principles and apply it to DSP versus, I don't know, TikTok or Google or some of those other channels. So I think it's a really good shift, and it's positive for the partners or for the platforms to actually be a full service solution in a lot of times, and I think really helps everyone from the agency, from the agency world as well. I mean, Hagup can probably attest to that. It's a lot easier to work with someone on Reddit if they've given you a really detailed instructions around what the creative should look like, what the testing frame should look like, as opposed to agency figuring out on its own. So everyone benefits from just better communication across the partner, the agency, the channel world. It's really it's been a big breakthrough in the last couple of years.
Well, and if the publisher is supplying the creative, then you don't know if that creative is going to be unique to your channel, or if it's being applied across all of the different channels. So how can you really measure the effectiveness of a particular creative, right? And Hagup, you probably see the same. Like I know that you provide a lot of the creative services for all of the campaigns that you manage, you know, specifically with a lot of the UGC creation and all of the creatives otherwise as well. Can you speak a little bit about the growth of TikTok and if UGC is working for advertiser?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, it's also taken into consideration the demographics, the audience, right? I think we're seeing with the younger audiences, there's less belief in traditional advertising, because to them, I think there was some study about Gen Zs and Gen Alphas, is that if they see an ad, they're like, oh, I don't trust this. It's kind of like you're manipulating me, or you're brainwashing me. Whereas the authenticity and the content coming from an individual, which is in this case a UGC or a creator on TikTok, they believe more in these than they believe in like just traditional ad. Hey, here's an ad in your face kind of approach. So making it authentic, actual user reviews, testimonials, things like this is really working, not just only on TikTok, it's just in creative in general. Also on the ASO side of things, like that's why I think putting anything that's like more organic makes a big difference. Speaking of TikTok and UGCs in general, yes, I think because of that, we're seeing whatever is working on TikTok works across every other channel, from Facebook, Google, programmatic DSPs. So any learnings we're finding on TikTok, we're basically taking it and applying it on the other channels. I do want to touch on, well, what does this mean from an operational standpoint? I think the operations have actually changed in comparison in the past, let's say maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Whereas 6 years ago, we were all just heavy on animation, 2D video, 3D video production, and we had a larger group of individuals that's like working on developing creatives. Whereas now in reality, it's actually 1 or 2 people that are working with different content creators, like going on the TikTok marketplace, finding all these influencers. So it became more like a project management and less about like a creative design. I mean, take that in a with a salt of grain, basically grain of salt. Sorry, and then and why this is also happening is because I think I have a different perspective than Simon had on the AI aspect. Is that AI is actually doing a lot of the work. So AI is working for us in terms of making iteration. So if we have an authentic concept of an UGC, we tested it out and it's working, then we're regenerating something similar with the use of AI, with some tools that are working really well of making different iterations. Iteration being that the individual is changing, the location is changing, it's merge and matching some additional content with your product. Like we're putting in some additional videos from like a gameplay or your product view, match it, and then the AI is like creating a combination, and that combination is working really well. So I'm a huge believer in this. So we're as a company, we're moving towards that direction of operational efficiency, and I think UGC is going to be the main driver even in the future. So therefore, finding a way to cut on costs and create a more efficient way will be the main win. Just because channels like TikTok, it requires a lot of creative. So you cannot just develop manually these creatives. So you gotta have to find alternative ways to create a machine that can produce to you a dozen of creatives for the cost of one.
Cool. That was really insightful. I think we have about 5 minutes left, so I want to go round robin a little bit with hot takes. What do you think is going to take off for the remainder of the year? Let's start off with Ken.
So I think just to kind of piggyback on the ad creative, I think a lot of people are going to put in a lot of work in using AI to generate different combinations and different things on ads. And I think that we're going to see a lot of really, really bad ads. But on the flip side, we're going to see a lot of really, really great ads. So we're going to see like the big chasm of, yeah, you clearly use AI on this. You spent 10 minutes creating this ad. And then we're going to see a masterpiece of ad creative that actually gets the customers moving forward and getting them to increase downloads. But the super interesting thing is, it might be that the bad ads, the poorly created ads, might test better. So that's going to be something that I'm interested in.
You think for the curiosity click, like
exactly
the ads, the shoe ads where there's like 4 legs instead of 2.
Because attention is a form of currency, and if your ad brings attention to your product, whether it be good or bad, who knows? It might work. So that is my super hot take. Bad ads might do well.
Simon, what's your hot take for H2?
My hot take for H2 is that we might start seeing, for performance marketing, a downfall of Meta. It's their customer service been less than stellar. Heard it from quite a few people. They've had a ton of issues in the past. And it seems like TikTok's making inroads, and now Reddit's the newcomer to the game as well. And all these channels, including the ones I mentioned, plus DSPs, have a very personalized support. You start working with their account managers. You're building a personalized strategy. Meta is a black hole when it comes to service and support. Something goes wrong, you can never get a response. So far, they've been able to do really well, and they've been very successful. Obviously, a lot of it's probably Instagram and just really a staying power. But from the performance marketing perspective and really getting the answers that you need to make your campaigns work, I feel like Meta's got some ways to go, and if they fall, they will fall hard.
And then Hagop, what are your hot takes for H2?
Yeah, agree with Simon on the reemergence, I guess, of some of the channels that exist, but such as Snap, Reddit, Pinterest. I think that we're going to see some diversification. Attribution, obviously, still a battle that we're still fighting, I would say. So still figuring that out would be something that we have to keep an eye on. AI, obviously, I think creatives, I'm going to put that aside, and I would say AI in analytics, attribution, predictive modeling, which is something that we've built right now, and we're testing it across some of our clients. And then afterwards, I want to get into UA co-pilots, basically creating UA managers that could do some of the work for you. We're tackling that from our side. And I want to add one more thing. If you have a Crunchbase, and if you just if you just search in Crunchbase AI in app marketing or just advertising or marketing, the amount of companies you will get there, it's insane. Obviously, there's some of them are just like using the word AI, and it's like, oh, we have an AI tool, etc. But in reality, it's not. Even if you just filter these out, there's so much development that's happening right now in AI that's gonna basically change the future of the operations of user acquisition and web marketing.
Yeah, I think what I said earlier is, accumulation of wealth at the top. I think unless you're fundamentally against another someone, good example is Apple, right? All the regulation going on inside the EU. It's gonna be interesting to see as they open up the app stores, but that likely will take a lot of time still, so maybe not H2. But otherwise, it's going to be big IPs getting bigger, big games getting bigger. The more data you have internally, basically, that is your strategic advantage, especially as companies like Apple cut off your access to data, right? So I think that's kind of what we'll see. That's really not really a hot take, but I think it's just the trend we're going right now.
All right, my hot take for H2 is, of course, going to be on creative. I mentioned it a little bit before, but test. Like there's so much that can be learned from just testing. Are you incorporating the messaging that makes sense for your channel? Are you incorporating the UGC style ads? Are you including interactive end cards? Are you using playables? Does playables work for non-gaming or just gaming? And really, push on your channels to make sure that your ads really stand out among the others, because the last thing that you want is to have the same homogeneous ad running across all your different channels. All right, I think we can take a question. I know we're running up on time right here. Mackenzie had a couple of questions. I think we touched on a little bit of it throughout the talk, just using Reddit as an app acquisition campaign. I know they are ranking #1 in Scan4 right now. They're really the up and coming new channel for app install campaigns. All the vets that are at Reddit are really helping to build out that platform. But anything from my fellow panelists about using Reddit? Have you used Reddit?
Haven't tried.
I can jump in here. So I think Reddit it's coming to the market really strong with app install. So they're giving out to some clients some credits and cashbacks. So I think that's a good way for you to at least mitigate the risk and retest them, and you haven't tested them in a while. I would add also from my experience is that whenever we ran Reddit in the past, they tend to have really strong LTVs. Like their user quality is really amazing. In some cases, it even beats the quality users of Facebook or Google. Obviously, I think they are making some adjustments so they can mitigate the CPI cost, because it's a little bit on the higher end right now. But I think we're going to start to see them up and coming. So I would say definitely test them out. What I'm seeing is like it's been like from the market is that a lot of like esports, real money gaming, fintech, services like e-commerce, like businesses like that are having major success. Gaming, I think it will depend on the audience. So obviously casual games might be a little bit tougher, but like for a younger audience, I think it might work. So all in all, I would say definitely test it this H2 in this H2.
All right. One final question. Who's going to win the match today, Hagop?
Oh, there's many matches, but I guess the major
Well,
one
the one right now.
Belgium, Ukraine. Oh, that's a tough one. If I'm gonna be political, of course Ukraine. But if I want to be just a soccer fan, I think Belgium, because Belgium, they have a better team.
All right. Well, I think it's time to wrap, so I'm going to hand it back over to Louis Tanguay.
All right, there it is. So thank you all very much. Thank you to Nancy for moderating. That was awesome. And inputting your thoughts in there as well. So I guess let's just say thanks to every single individual here. Hagop, go talk to advertiser if you want to do better with your advertising and other things. Simon does some consulting on the side, but also he's a growth genius expert as well. Alex Kozachenko, he's my Austin brother now. He's down here with us. Go download all the Hyperbeard games and, monetize them. Just keep buying stuff through them. And Mr. Ken Vermeil, if you're looking to build an app or optimize your app, onboarding process, flow, all that jazz, then call up Mr. Jazzy Ken Vermeil. And last but certainly not least, because she's amazing, Miss Nancy Roberts, Craftsman Plus. Go to them for all your creative needs and whatever else that I might be missing. Go to craftsmanplus.com or whatever it is and talk to Nancy. She's amazing. You find her everywhere. So thank you all for joining. Oh, and don't forget, if you want to go to Brazil, you got 2 weeks because we're doing AppGrow Summit Brazil, July 11th. Other than that, San Francisco on September 12th. And going back to Europe for October 3rd in London and October 24th in Barcelona. So there you go. Join us, travel the world, all that jazz. Again, wrapping up. Thank you all very much, all of the amazing panelists, and hope to see you all soon, IRL.